I am pleased to introduce you to Rachel Swarns, who's a correspondent for the New York Times. She is here to talk about the book that she wrote called American Tapestry, Story of the Black, White, and Multiracial Ancestors of Michelle Obama.
In January of 2009, a colleague of mine was working on an article about the president and his rainbow family. And at the very last minute, we realized, oh, we don't know very much about Michelle Obama's family tree. And that became an article about Mrs. Obama's great-great-great-grandmother, whose name was Melvinia. She was a slave girl valued at $475 in 1852. And her great-great-great-grandfather, who was a white man whose identity was a mystery.
How was the whole process?
I just started out my research kind of just recording people. I had help from some members of her family who shared their memories and photos and records with me, and that's where it started. That's Michelle Obama as a baby with her mother and father and her brother, who, as you know, is a basketball coach. I know that her family has found it fascinating. I hope she does. You might imagine what it might be like if someone were to knock on your door and say, by the way, your ancestors owned, members of the First Lady's family. And, a lot of us might like a connection to the White House, but that is not usually the one that we're looking for. Harder still that one of your ancestors may have raped a member. Some of these white descendants wanted nothing to do with me. Some of them were willing to grapple with the history, and Joan was one of those people. This guy with the beard is the man who owned Melvinia, and the man who's looking off into the distance, who looks a little better dressed than the others, is the man that the DNA testing suggests was most likely Dolphus's father. This is Dolphus, the First Lady's great-great-grandfather, Melvinia's son, who is biracial, and his son. This is as an older man. He was a remarkable person. He carried his family so far, and in the 1880s moved to Birmingham. By 1900, he owned his own home. By 1910, he had his own business. In 1950, the news of his passing appeared on the front page of the black newspaper at the time. It is the history of this country. It is the most common of common stories. At the same time, even though we know this and this is out there, it's quite personal and different if you have names and faces to it. And I think that even though we know this, in a lot of ways we have not dealt with it. I could tell you, I have white ancestors, but I don't know their names, and I don't, and most African Americans don't, because of people's unwillingness to talk about it. The specifics, most people don't know the specifics. So the descendants of a slave and slave owner got to meet for the first time.
This is such a unique event.
Yeah.
I'd love to have been a fly on the wall there. Yeah. Were you?
Yes. And for a lot of these family members, these white distant cousins of the First Lady, this was very challenging to deal with. And as well as for some, of her black members of her family too, who talked about the silence that there was about slavery and white ancestry and racial struggle over time. They shared photos and stories and phone numbers, though I don't know that they're going to be hanging out for years to come. But it was still quite a remarkable day, and it was something to see.
I'm just curious how this process has affected your journalism, because you said you went back to your day job. How has it affected how you do your journalism?
This is the kind of writing I like doing generally, but I think it's made me better at long narrative writing. I did much more of that the year that I came back than I had before. And I think it's made me, more passionate about that kind of work.
What's important for us to know about Michelle Obama and her place in society?
She is much more representative of the experience than her husband is. And I think that when he was running for office, that helped him in the African American community, because I think there were questions about him, and the fact that he chose this woman to marry said something to people. And the fact that, she is in that house, the White House built in part by slave labor, it's a pretty remarkable thing when you think about it. Thank you.